Hi. Recently, I have been called contentious, arrogant, rebellious, deceitful, wicked, and evil. I've been told that I have lost my faculties. I've been compared to Jezebel. And I've been told, evil must burn. Always does, always will. That was in caps. This was all said by one person. Why did he say it? Well, it was posted on my video, We Know Something Yahweh Doesn't Know. That video talks about Yahweh's evil stance on slavery. I said that we know slavery is wrong, but Yahweh doesn't know it's wrong. And apparently I'm evil because I point out this truth about Yahweh. First, let me say that I consider it a badge of honor to be compared to Jezebel. Jezebel was a badass. She was a mighty woman, if ever there was a mighty woman. Jezzy stuck with the old paths, following the gods of her parents and her own culture, rather than giving up her own heritage to worship the God of the people whose land she inhabited. That couldn't have been easy, so it took a lot of fortitude on her part. To go among the ancient Hebrews and worship your own gods would be like walking into a church in the southern United States and proclaiming that you worship Odin or Zeus. Actually, it was more than that. Today in the U.S., you might get kicked out of the church, but that's probably about it. Jezebel, on the other hand, was putting her life on the line. And she didn't bend, she didn't bow, and she didn't give a rat's tail what those people thought about her. Interestingly, after Jezebel's death, her daughter, Athaliah, ascended to the throne of Israel. She was the only woman to ever hold that position on her own, and she reestablished the ancient pagan religion in the nation. Jezebel helped to make this happen. That's a huge deal. So kudos to this powerful woman, and please call me Jezebel anytime you take a notion. It's all in one's perspective as to whether being called Jezebel is an insult, right? And I'm guessing, from the perspective of Jezebel and her people and gods, Jezzy was a heroine among heroines. Let's look at it from Jezebel's perspective. Jez was a princess before marrying Ahab and becoming queen of Israel. Her parents were king and queen of Sidon and Tyre of Phoenicia. As the rulers, they were also priest and priestess of Ashtoreth, or Astarte, and Baal. Truth be told, the assault on Jezebel was actually a political move by the Hebrews against the ancient religion of the goddess. Yahwehism was a new male religion. It eventually helped stamp out the ancient goddess worship. In about 874 BCE, Jezebel became King Ahab's wife in order to make a military and trade alliance between the kingdoms of Israel and Phoenicia. While the Bible claims that Jezebel's father was simply Baal's high priest, the truth is that the primary god, or rather goddess, of Phoenicia was Astarte, or Ashtoreth. Baal was simply Astarte's consort, or her son or husband. It's like how Yahweh was married to Israel, who was his firstborn son and daughter as well. Yahweh's bisexual and incestuous. And Jesus is married to the church, which is his sister, daughter, and also his mother. Most likely it was the worship of Ashtoreth, a goddess, that was the real ant in the pants of the prophet Elijah. Of course, the writers of the Hebrew literature didn't add the goddess to the story. Maybe they didn't want to admit that her influence was far and wide. The goddess was anathema to the Yahweh worshippers, just as she is today to the Yahweh worshippers. Jezebel, being a follower of the goddess, was to Israel a dangerous woman because of her power and her desire to speak her own mind and stand for her own beliefs. But she didn't try to turn the Israelites from Yahweh. She simply wanted religious tolerance. She wanted everybody to be free to worship as each person saw fit. She wanted what we try to have here in the United States. But what did the prophet Elijah do? He blamed a drought on Jezebel's husband. Yahweh refused to let it rain due to Ahab's sins, according to Elijah. Like preachers today blame hurricanes and tsunamis on the gays or abortion. Elijah was probably out there in the streets every day carrying signs, causing unrest, and generally being a threat to the monarchy. Jezebel, perhaps wisely and perhaps unwisely, therefore moved against some of Yahweh's prophets. And of course, Elijah had this big plan to have a contest to see whose God was the most powerful. He had the prophets go to Mount Carmel and to hold the competition. There were 850 prophets of Jezebel. Well, of Astarte, they were serving Jezebel. And they all showed up. A couple of bulls were put on the altar. Ashtoreth's prophets tried to light up the altar but couldn't, according to the story. Elijah was able to get the fire going, and then he ordered all of Ashtoreth's prophets to be murdered. Margaret Moose stated, "This description of the mass murder of 850 people is very specific, unlike the vague reference to Jezebel ordering the cutting off of some of the prophets of Yahweh. Yet no one seems to see Elijah's acts as disgusting. Is any act acceptable when ordered by God?" Yes, Margaret. Any evil act is acceptable to the followers of Yahweh. This contest was most likely just a trick of Elijah's to get Astarte's prophets all in one place so he could slaughter them. Then, of course, nobody was left to say whether Elijah got a fire going or not. It was all Elijah's word alone, and maybe the words of Yahweh's prophets, who naturally would side with Elijah. What is really strange is that Elijah then ran and hid from Jezebel. He was supposedly capable of calling down fire from heaven, but was afraid of a woman. So he scurried away and went into hiding. Interestingly, when it came time for Jezebel to be murdered by those who hated her, she fixed herself up and prepared to die with dignity as the queen and high priestess that she was. She didn't cower in fear like Elijah did. Christians admire Elijah. They think he's a wonderful prophet. He was a murderer, but murder is just fine with them anytime Yahweh commands it. If the story of Jezebel is basically true, it's no doubt been fixed up to make the Israelites look good. The winners write the history, or those who write their own history make it something it wasn't. They color their stories to make themselves look better than their enemies. And their religious beliefs alter or create how they view what happened. What is bizarre is that Yahweh's people murdered hundreds. And as Moose wrote, they piled up severed heads, assassinated a king, threw a woman out a window, trampled her with horses, and then hunted down hundreds more who were associated with the family and chopped them to pieces. But that was considered good by the followers of Yahweh at the time, and it's considered good by the followers of Yahweh today. We would view this as mass murder by a psychotic killer if it happened in our present society, apart from being Yahweh's plan. But since Yahweh commanded it, it's a beautiful story. Again, quoting Moose, Jezebel's death is one of those many moments in history where the worship of the dual deities, the god and the goddess, began to fall to the new monotheism in a bloodbath. And the new religion began the important task of erasing the past. Never let anyone think that calling me Jezebel is a slur. Whether I might be willing to worship her god and goddess or not, and I would not, I still honor her for her strength and courage and badassery. She ranks right up there in bravery with the likes of Daniel, who supposedly stood alone against what he considered to be wrong. May Jezebel's memory never perish off the face of the earth. But if you're a Christian, don't try to tell me your morality is higher or more noble than mine. That's ludicrous. Nobody's morality is lower than that of a Yahweh worshiper. And I'll talk more about that in the next installment titled Call Me Jezebel Part 2, Christians Are Immoral. Thanks for watching. Bye.